Cambodia calls it economic independence. Vietnam calls it an unmonitored dam. Both governments might actually be right, and a 180-kilometer waterway now cutting through the Mekong Basin is why. Act 1, 2 ceremonies, 1 rice field still waiting. Picture a rice field in Bore Cholsa district, Takeo province. The mud is soft underfoot. The water sits ankle deep between the rows. And a farmer named Uksam ATH has spent the last 2 years watching his own government celebrate a future that has not yet reached him. The first celebration came in August 2024. Thousands gathered nearby to launch what officials called a historic mega project. The second came in April 2026, when Prime Minister Han Mane himself started the machinery on the canal's much larger second phase. 2 ceremonies, 2 years apart, and in between them, Sam Ah's daily life did not move at all. He suspects the delay has something to do with which contractor works his stretch of the route, Cambodian or Chinese, though he cannot say for certain. What he can say is simpler and harder. The canal meant to transform his country has so far transformed nothing about his own life except one thing. It put a price on his land. Nobody has paid it yet. That gap between the promise and the paperwork is the real story here. On one side, a national vision of modernization and independence. On the other, a farmer standing in the same field, waiting while the excavators inch closer. For decades, planners have called Cambodia maritime locked. Its main road to the open sea has always run down the Mekong River and straight through Vietnamese territory. This canal is designed to end that, cutting a direct channel to the Gulf of Thailand. But the same waterway built to free Cambodia from one neighbor is now the center of an unresolved dispute with that very neighbor over what it will do to the river they both depend on. Act 2, a dependence built over half a century. This is not a new arrangement suddenly turning inconvenient. For 50 years, Cambodia's trade has moved through someone else's ports, on someone else's terms. Undoing that in a single decade is not an adjustment, it is a rupture. Every sack of rice, every container of textiles that left Cambodia for a foreign buyer traveled first through Vietnam, and every trip cost something. Time, fees, a quiet dependence nobody had to name because it was simply how the map worked. Vietnamese officials have never denied that leverage existed. Why would they? It was never a secret. It was just geography. That dependence is now ending, or so the promise goes. The canal's promise is not incremental. It is structural. Direct sea access, bypassing Vietnamese waterways completely. For a family in Canal province moving rice to market, that could mean a shorter, cheaper, more predictable route to a foreign buyer. Assuming the canal finishes on schedule and its tolls stay competitive. Assuming for now is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Act 3, 51% Cambodian, 49% Chinese, 100% contested. Follow the money and the real story gets sharper. 51% of this project belongs to Cambodian shareholders. 49% belongs to a Chinese investment company, a commercial split, and a source of real regional unease. Beijing has backed its stake with $200 million in loans and another $200 million in grants, disclosed by Cambodian officials earlier this year. The project's own price tag has moved too, down from roughly $1.7 billion to close to $1.2 billion. Officials call it a design adjustment. A $500 million swing is not a rounding error. For Han Mane, this canal is legacy, proof that Cambodia no longer needs a neighbor's permission to reach the sea. For Hanoi, the calculation runs in reverse. Vietnam's influence over Phnom Penh, built in part on exactly this kind of dependence, has been quietly slipping since the day construction began. Vietnam has asked publicly for Cambodia to coordinate through the Mekong River Commission and share the technical data behind the project. That request has gone out. A full answer has not come back. And beneath the diplomacy, a harder question. Some Vietnamese analysts argue the canal is dual use, that its depth could one day accommodate naval vessels moving up from the Gulf of Thailand. Others push back hard, pointing out that a Chinese-funded expressway would move troops faster and with far less attention than a slow civilian canal running past more than 1 million residents. What keeps the question alive is proximity. The canal runs close to Cambodia's Ream naval base, recently refurbished with Chinese support. Cambodia has offered no confirmation that the canal serves any military purpose. Neither claim has been settled, and that itself is the unease. Act 4, what the river gives Cambodia, it may take from the delta. Here is where the story turns from geopolitics to something you can actually feel. What this canal gives Cambodia upstream, it may be quietly taking from a delta 300 kilometers downstream. Cambodia's own case is straightforward. Cheaper freight, more competitive exporters. Cambodian government projections put job creation from surrounding industrial zones at anywhere from 50,000 to as many as 1.6 million by 2050. That is the vision on paper. Downstream, The picture is murkier and genuinely contested. Research linked to the Stimson Center suggests dry season water flow into Vietnam's Mekong Delta could fall by 50 to 70%. Other studies put it closer to 5 or 13%. A separate Vietnamese government study estimated a 30% drop along the Hawk River, one of the Delta's main arteries. Nobody has resolved which number is right. That uncertainty is not a footnote, it is the entire problem. 300 kilometers south in Camau province, a 60-year-old farmer named Trancy Kim Hong already knows what a bad dry season costs. She has stood on cracked, salt-stained earth waiting for water that does not come fast enough. Land that used to grow rice reliably now fails her more often than it should. And the canal upstream has not even opened yet. She is not waiting on the Funan Techo Canal specifically. She is waiting on a river system already worn down by years of upstream dams and worsening salt intrusion. Lei Antoine, a senior lecturer at Canal University who has studied this delta for decades, put it plainly. The canal does not create this problem. It adds a new deliberate reduction in fresh water to a system that was already struggling to cope. And that means more frequent, more severe salt intrusion right when farmers like Kim Hong can least afford it. Vietnam has not tried to stop construction. It has raised the issue through the Mekong River Commission and directly Prime Minister to Prime Minister, while stopping short of demanding a halt. That restraint is not weakness. It is its own kind of consequence. A country whose food security sits downstream of someone else's decision is negotiating from the weaker seat however carefully the conversation is conducted. Act 5, independence for one country is rarely a clean story for the region. Strip away the engineering, and what is left is a familiar regional pattern, just wearing a new shape. Cambodia is trading one dependence on Vietnamese ports for another on Chinese financing and construction. And in doing so, it creates a new dependence for its neighbor downstream. A dependence on Cambodia's willingness to share data and manage the river responsibly. Sovereignty, in this telling, is not a finish line. It is a rearrangement of who relies on whom. Cambodia has every right to overcome a geographic disadvantage decades in the making. Vietnam has every right to protect the freshwater supply millions of Delta residents depend on. Neither side is acting in bad faith. Both are simply protecting what is theirs to protect. So picture them both right now on the same river system in the same season. In Takeo, Psalm 80H is still standing inside the canal boundary, still uncompensated, still waiting. In Takmao, Kim Hong is watching the salt line creep further into ground that used to feed her family. Neither of them controls what happens next. Neither do the two governments now bound together by a waterway that answers to both of them and to neither. The future of the Mekong Basin is not being decided in a single announcement. It is being decided one excavation, one compensation payment, one unresolved data request at a time. The real story of regional infrastructure is never just the concrete poured into the ground. It is how that concrete quietly rearranges power, ecology, and daily life across a border. I am Hiro the Hornbill, and this is the ASEAN Angle. If this episode gave you a new way of seeing the region, subscribe so you do not miss the next one. New episodes weekly, link in the description.